The only sound in the room was the soft tear of wrapping paper, the kind that almost seemed to echo in the silence. No laughter, no music, just the crisp crackling of paper being pulled away, each tear adding to the tension. Lily's small hands, trembling slightly with excitement, worked delicately at the corners of the gift, her eyes wide with anticipation. It was the kind of innocence only a child could have, the belief that every gift holds a secret, a promise of magic. She looked up at me, her face glowing, as if expecting this moment to be special. And for a moment, I allowed myself to believe it too. But when Lily opened the box, everything changed. The smile on her face faltered. Her little hands froze in place. The box was empty. My heart sank into my stomach. It didn't make sense. A gift should have something inside it, shouldn't it? But this was nothing. Just a plain cardboard bottom, staring back at us like a cruel joke. I wanted to say something, to fix it, but my voice caught in my throat. Before I could even move, I heard him, my father. His laugh, short and sharp, sliced through the room. "Kids like her shouldn't expect anything," he said. His voice was cold, dismissive. "The world's got enough leeches already." And there, in that moment, I saw it. Lily's eyes, those big, trusting eyes, filled with confusion, and maybe even a flicker of hurt. She didn't cry. Not yet. But I could see the sting. She didn't understand.
How could she?
She'd worked so hard to make this Christmas feel real, to bring something, anything, that could thaw the frozen walls of this house. But instead, all she got was emptiness. I thought about leaving then, just packing up and taking her home. But I couldn't, because there was something I had to prove.
Not to them, to her.
She needed to see that even in the coldest places, there could be warmth. That family could mean something real. So I stayed. But I couldn't have known in that moment just how everything would change after that empty gift. The truth was, Lily wasn't the only one who would surprise us all that day. And what happened next would shake everything to its core. The car came to a stop in front of the house, and I felt the familiar knot form in my stomach. It was spotless, pristine, the kind of perfect that only came from years of meticulous upkeep, but there was no warmth in it, no life. The house stood tall and cold, like a museum, frozen in time, with no place for us. As I reached for the door handle, I glanced back at Lily, her eyes wide with innocent hope. She was eager, so eager, and for a moment, I almost believed this could be different. Maybe this year, maybe this time, things will change. But deep down, I knew. I had always known. The moment we stepped inside, the tension hit me like a brick wall. The air was still, too still, and thick with silence. The familiar scent of antiseptic cleanliness hung in the air, mingled with the faint odor of old furniture. The walls, white and sterile, made everything feel distant. My mother, who greeted us with her usual politeness, barely seemed to see us. Her smile was tight, her eyes lacking the warmth I had once longed for. A quick, almost perfunctory hug for me. A pat on the head for Lily, like she was just another object to be acknowledged, not someone deserving of genuine affection. Rachel didn't even bother to look up from her phone when we walked in. Her hello was a half-hearted mumble, as if her attention was already elsewhere. And then there was George, my father. He didn't stand up. He barely acknowledged our presence, offering only a grunt in our direction. His eyes never left the television screen, as if we were intruders in his home, not guests. He was sitting in his usual chair, the one worn from years of use, a whiskey glass in one hand and the TV remote in the other. The coldness of his reception hit me harder than it ever had before. We were back in the same place, the same pattern, the same emotional icebox. But Lily? She was still hopeful. She wasn't deterred by the lack of warmth. She had made drawings for each of them, little gifts of art, each one meticulously crafted with care. Her small hands had worked on them for weeks. She had stayed up late, coloring, creating, pouring her heart into those pieces of paper. Every detail, every color, every line meant something to her. She wasn't just giving gifts, she was offering pieces of herself, hoping against hope that this would be the year her family would see her, that they would accept her. Her excitement was palpable as she stepped forward, clutching the first drawing tightly. Her little voice rang out, innocent and bright. "Grandma, I made this for you." My mother took the drawing with a quick glance, muttered a dull, "Thank you," and handed it back without a second thought. No smiles, no appreciation. Just another empty gesture. Lily didn't flinch. She smiled back, even though I could see the slight hesitation in her eyes. She was trying to make it okay, trying to be the child who believed in the good, even when the world didn't show it back. Rachel barely looked up from her phone when Lily handed her a drawing. "Nice," she said, her voice uninterested, as though Lily's art was just another thing to be dismissed. I could feel the tightness in my chest, the heat creeping up my neck. The anger I had buried for so long began to resurface. How could they be so indifferent? How could they not see what she was doing? But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Not in front of her. Then came George. I held my breath, hoping, praying that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Lily approached him hesitantly, offering the drawing with both hands, her face hopeful. "Grandpa, I made this for you," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper, as if she feared rejection. George glanced at her for a brief second, his expression unreadable, before grunting in response. He didn't even look at the drawing for more than a moment. He just waved her away with a dismissive hand, already back to his television. "Whatever," he muttered, as if she wasn't even worth the effort of a real response. Lily's face fell, but she quickly recovered, plastering a smile back on her lips and walking back to me. I could feel her tiny heart breaking with every step. I wanted to say something, anything to defend her, but I couldn't. It felt like the old weight of the past had settled on me, like the years of silence and bitterness had wrapped their cold fingers around my throat, choking my voice. I wanted to scream, to demand that they see her, that they love her, but instead, I sat there in silence, pretending everything was fine. Lily sat down beside me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. But she didn't cry. Not yet. She was too proud. She held her drawings close to her chest, as though they could protect her from the coldness that surrounded her. I couldn't protect her. I had tried for so long, but I had failed. The truth was, I had brought her into this. I had hoped. And now, all I could do was watch her try to navigate a family that didn't want to be reached, a family that didn't care. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere remained unchanged. The same cold indifference, the same emotional walls. My family went about their usual routines, each person retreating into their own world, leaving Lily and me to navigate the silent, suffocating space between us. I could see the confusion in her eyes as she looked around, trying to figure out why they didn't respond the way she thought they would. I had hoped that Lily's kindness would be enough to break through their hardness. But I was wrong. It wasn't enough. It never had been. And I couldn't protect her from the truth that sometimes love isn't something you can earn. Sometimes it's something that's just never given. And in that moment, I knew that the visit was already over before it had even truly begun. Lily's tiny hands trembled slightly as she ripped the last piece of wrapping paper from the box. The room was silent except for the crinkle of paper and the soft hum of the heater, which seemed to grow louder the more I watched her. Her eyes were wide, filled with innocent hope, the kind of hope that makes you believe that anything is possible. She looked up at me, her excitement palpable, her little hands holding the empty box, ready to see the treasure inside. But when the paper fell away, the smile on her face faltered. Her small fingers froze, the joy in her expression evaporating, and confusion replaced it. She stared at the box, her brows furrowing in uncertainty. She tipped it over, gently shook it, hoping something, anything might fall out. But there was nothing. My heart skipped a beat as I saw her face shift from confusion to hurt. She didn't cry. Not yet. But I could see it in her eyes, the sudden realization that she had been let down. The emptiness of the box mirrored the emptiness I had felt for years. The thing that I had always hoped would change, my family's coldness, their lack of love, was now reflected in this moment. Lily, this sweet, kind little girl, had been offering her heart, and it was met with nothing. I could feel the weight of it, the suffocating pressure of my helplessness. I couldn't protect her from this. She had given them her most precious gift, herself, and they had rejected her without a second thought. I wanted to reach out, to fix it, to make it better for her, but the words stuck in my throat. I was trapped in the same silence that had always been between us, the silence that was louder than any argument. The room seemed to hold its breath. I could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock, louder than before, like each second was being stretched, taunting me. And then I heard it, a sharp laugh. It was George, of course. My father. The sound was short, cold, and mocking. "What? You think the world owes you something?" he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Kids like her shouldn't expect anything. The world's got enough leeches already." The words stung. I felt my pulse quicken, my body tensing. I couldn't believe it. The cruelty in his tone, the complete lack of empathy. I wanted to shout, to defend Lily, to tell him he was wrong, but I couldn't. Not in front of her. Not in front of them. The silence was deafening again, and all I could do was watch as Lily's smile faltered, her tiny hands still clutching the empty box, as if she was willing it to change, to give her what she had hoped for. Rachel chimed in from the corner, her voice casual but cutting. "She's just like her mother," she muttered, barely glancing up from her phone. "Always expecting handouts. I'm surprised she even thought she deserved anything." The words hung in the air, thick with judgment. I could feel my blood boiling. My chest tightened. How could they be so heartless? How could they not see what she was trying to do? But I couldn't say anything. I couldn't make a scene, not with Lily sitting there, her eyes wide and still holding on to that small shred of hope, clinging to the idea that they might see her for who she truly was. Lily, bless her heart, tried to hold herself together. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she forced a smile, but it was shaky, unsure. Her little chin trembled, and I saw the effort it took for her to keep it all in. She wanted to understand, to process why this was happening, but she couldn't.
Not yet.
She looked at me, her big eyes searching for an answer, but I had none to give. She didn't ask for help, not in words. She didn't have to. All she wanted was to be seen, to be loved, and yet all she got was more rejection. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, the frustration threatening to spill over. How could they do this to her? How could they be so cold, so indifferent to a child who had done nothing but try to bring joy into their lives? I wanted to take her in my arms, to shield her from this, to make it all go away, but I didn't. I couldn't. I could only sit there, watching her try to hold it together, hoping that somehow she could make it through this. Lily's hands shook as she placed the box back down on the floor. She looked up at me again, her eyes still filled with uncertainty. Her lips trembled, but she didn't say a word. She didn't cry. Not yet. She looked down at the empty box, then up at George, then back at me. Her gaze was full of questions that I didn't have answers to. She didn't understand why they didn't see her, didn't appreciate her. How could she? She had given them the best she had, and they had given her nothing in return. And then, something inside me broke. I knew I had to say something, do something, but I couldn't. The words were stuck. The room was heavy with silence, with unspoken thoughts and painful truths that none of us wanted to face. So, I stayed silent, as I had always done, letting the weight of it press down on us all. And Lily? She sat there, her small hands in her lap, her smile gone. She was still trying to hold it together, still trying to believe that the love she so desperately wanted was somehow worth waiting for. But in that moment, I realized the painful truth. She was going to have to learn the hardest lesson of all, the one I had learned long ago. Not everyone will love you, no matter how much you try. Some people, no matter how hard you wish, will never change. Lily stood still for a moment, the empty gift box still resting in her lap. Her small hands trembled slightly, her fingers brushing against the edges of the paper. The room was quiet, suffocatingly so. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on us all. George sat across the room, still oblivious, his eyes fixed on the TV, a smirk playing on his lips. I could almost hear his thoughts, mocking, dismissive. But then Lily did something unexpected. She stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. The confidence in her walk seemed out of place, like she was stepping into a storm that no one could see but her. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper, carefully folded. I watched, frozen, as she held it in her hands, turning it over a few times as if to make sure it was real. The simplicity of the gesture was stark against the heaviness in the room. She wasn't looking for validation. She wasn't asking for anything more. She just wanted to give. The kind of giving that came from a place of pure heart, a child's belief that love, even when it's not returned, can still be offered. Lily walked over to George with steady steps, the paper clutched tightly in her small hands. My heart pounded in my chest, a mixture of pride and dread filling every inch of me. What was she doing? Didn't she see that this wasn't how it worked here? That love, that kindness, was a currency that was never exchanged in this house? She didn't even flinch when she reached George. With a small, shy smile, she held out the piece of paper to him. George looked at her, his expression still hardened, his eyes barely leaving the screen. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't even acknowledge her. But then he shifted, lifting a hand to take the paper. His fingers brushed the corner of the page, and I saw the slightest flicker in his eyes. But that was all. His voice, when it came, was dismissive, coated in sarcasm. "What is this? A drawing of a snowman?" he asked, his tone dripping with mockery. Lily didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She just stood there, her hands still outstretched, waiting for him to take the gift, to see it. She was so calm, so sure of herself. It was as though she had already accepted that the world might not always give back what she offered, but that wouldn't stop her from offering it anyway. As George unfolded the paper, I could feel my chest tighten. The room grew even quieter. The family, as indifferent as they were, seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the inevitable, waiting for George to tear her down, to laugh at her, to make her feel small. But when he opened it, when he saw what was inside, something changed. The room seemed to hold its breath. The atmosphere shifted in the faintest way, just enough for me to notice. I could see George's face. It wasn't what I expected. The scornful smile didn't return. His brow furrowed ever so slightly, the edges of his lips pulling into a frown, as if he didn't understand what he was seeing. There was no laughter, no mockery. His hands froze for just a second, the paper still in his grip. It wasn't anger. It wasn't ridiculous. It was confusion. His eyes flickered toward Lily, then back down at the piece of paper in his hands, as if he was seeing something he didn't know how to process. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what this meant. Was this the start of something new? Would he finally see her? Would he finally recognize that this little girl, with all her innocence and kindness, deserved better than the treatment she had received? The family sat there in silence. The room was still, the only sound being the faint hum of the heater and the occasional clink of silverware from the kitchen. We all waited, uncertain, unsure of what was coming next. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, pounding in my ears. George's face didn't change much, but there was something different in the way he held the paper. Something softer. Something I hadn't seen in him in years. The moment stretched out longer than it should have, like time itself had slowed down, waiting for George to make a move. I glanced at Lily. She stood there, her face calm, her eyes fixed on George. She wasn't asking for anything. She wasn't demanding love or affection. She was simply offering a piece of herself, hoping that this small, simple gesture would be enough. And then, George folded the paper carefully. It wasn't done hastily. He didn't scrunch it up or toss it aside. He placed it gently on the side table beside him. He didn't speak, didn't comment. He just left. He stood up from his chair, the heavy silence lingering in the air. My heart sank. He didn't say a word. No thank you, no acknowledgement, no change in his demeanor. He walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the hall, leaving us all behind. Lily didn't move. She didn't react.
She didn't cry.
She just stood there, her hands clasped in front of her. The moment felt unfinished, unresolved. There was no closure, no triumphant moment where everything changed. Just a quiet, aching void where there should have been understanding, where there should have been some kind of shift. And yet, as I watched Lily, something shifted in me. It wasn't much, but it was there. a tiny seed of hope planted in my chest. Maybe it wasn't about the change I had hoped for. Maybe it wasn't about fixing everything. But Lily had done something I never could. She had shown George, without words, what it meant to be human again. And that, in itself, was powerful. I looked at her, standing there in the quiet aftermath. She didn't need a response. She didn't need validation. She had given her gift, and in doing so, she had shown me a strength I never knew she had. And somehow, that felt like enough. The room was still as George unfolded the small piece of paper Lily had given him. My heart raced as I watched, unsure of what would happen next. His fingers, stiff from years of disuse, barely moved as he held the paper in his hands. The weight of the moment hung in the air, pressing on everyone, leaving no one daring to speak. I caught a glimpse of Lily, standing beside me, her little hands clasped tightly together, eyes focused on George, waiting, hoping. What was he seeing? What was he thinking? I could feel the tension in the room building, each second dragging longer than the last. For a moment, George's expression didn't change. He stared at the drawing, his face still set in that familiar scowl. The paper in his hands seemed so insignificant compared to the years of bitterness he had carried with him. But then, something shifted. His grip on the paper loosened, and I saw it. His face softened, just slightly, but it was enough. Enough for me to notice. His usual mask of mockery fell away, replaced by something unreadable. His brows furrowed ever so slightly, and for the first time, I saw a crack in the hard shell he had built around himself. George blinked, his eyes flickering down at the paper again as though he was trying to make sense of what he was seeing. It was a drawing of him, holding hands with his late wife, Lily's grandmother. The simplicity of it, the innocence in Lily's gesture, seemed to open a door to a past George had long since shut away. I could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes, the faintest hint of something lost, something he had forgotten or buried. The air in the room felt heavier, the silence almost suffocating, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for George to say something. Anything. But George didn't speak. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss her. He simply stared at the drawing, his face still softening, as if something deep inside him was stirred. The room was frozen in time. I couldn't tear my eyes away from him, not even as my own thoughts swirled in confusion. What was happening? Could it be that after all these years, after all the hurt, George was finally feeling something? I looked at Lily, still standing by my side, her wide eyes full of hope, though she didn't seem to understand the significance of the moment. She had given him a simple gift, a drawing. She had no idea what it was doing to him, no idea that her kindness was unraveling something inside him. She was just offering him love, unconditionally, without expecting anything in return. And somehow, that was exactly what he needed. For the first time in what felt like forever, George was silent. His face, once so harsh, was now still, his lips pressed into a thin line. I could see the conflict in his eyes, a battle between the man he had become and the person he used to be. The man who had loved, the man who had smiled, the man who once held hands with the woman he had lost. The gesture was simple, but it had triggered something profound. George wasn't just seeing Lily's drawing, he was seeing his own past, the part of him that had been buried under layers of bitterness and anger. And as I watched him, something inside me clicked. I realized then that Lily's gift wasn't just for him, it was for all of us. Through her innocence, through her pure, unguarded love, she had cracked the wall George had built around his heart. She had reminded him of who he used to be, of the man he had once been before the pain of loss had hardened him into the person he was now. But just as quickly as the moment had begun, it ended. George, still holding the paper, stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The room, which had been holding its breath, now exhaled in collective disbelief. He didn't say a word. He didn't even glance at anyone. He simply turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. The silence that followed was unbearable. We all sat there, stunned, unsure of what had just happened. The hum of the house, the ticking of the old clock in the corner, filled the silence, but it felt so much louder now. The contrast between the tension that had filled the room moments before and the eerie quiet that followed was striking. No one moved. No one spoke. We all sat frozen, waiting for some kind of resolution, but there was none. George had left, and with him, the moment of change seemed to vanish, like a dream that faded the moment you woke up. I turned to Lily, who was still standing there, her eyes fixed on the door where George had disappeared. She didn't look disappointed. She didn't cry. She simply looked as though she had done what she came to do. She had offered her gift, and it was done. She had given, not expecting anything in return. And for a moment, I was proud of her, proud of the strength she had shown, proud of the grace with which she had handled a situation that no child should ever have to face. The moment was over, but I knew something had changed. Not for George, not yet, but for me. And for Lily. That small act of kindness, that simple drawing, had somehow made an impact. It had cracked the cold, hardened exterior of my father. And I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew that for the first time in years, the door had been opened. And maybe, just maybe, the smallest gesture could be the beginning of something larger. The moment George left, the room seemed to freeze in time. The heavy silence settled over us like a blanket, suffocating and thick. The air, once filled with the tension of his response, now seemed almost too still, as if the house itself was waiting for something that would never come. I looked around, my gaze flitting from my mother to Rachel, hoping for some acknowledgement of what had just transpired. But no one said a word. Rachel, still glued to her phone, didn't look up. She didn't even blink. My mother, ever the diplomat, merely adjusted the sleeve of her sweater and continued her own quiet, methodical movements. It was as if nothing had happened, as if the small, fragile moment where something might have changed was simply erased, forgotten. No one was willing to speak about it, not even to acknowledge the wound that had just been opened, the possibility of healing that had briefly flickered. The weight of their indifference crushed me, but I didn't let it show. I couldn't. The tension that had filled the air just moments before seemed to have disappeared entirely, but it wasn't gone. It was just buried again, deep beneath layers of avoidance and denial. Lily sat quietly beside me, her small hands still fiddling with the small gifts she had received. She didn't ask about George. She didn't ask why he left or what had happened. She simply played, her focus shifting from one trinket to the next. There was something so painfully pure about her in that moment. She didn't need to make sense of the world around her. She didn't need to try and fix things. She had done her part. She had given what she could, and in her eyes, that was enough. It wasn't about the reaction. It was about the offering, the simple, sincere act of giving without expectation. I watched her with a mixture of pride and guilt. Pride, because I knew how strong she was, stronger than I had ever been at her age. She had given so much of herself, unafraid, without hesitation, and in return, she had gotten nothing. No warmth, no appreciation. And yet, she had walked through it with the grace of someone who understood that not everyone will meet you with kindness. But the guilt, the overwhelming guilt, came from the fact that I hadn't been able to protect her. I hadn't shielded her from this coldness, from this rejection. I had let her down, even though I had known what this family was like, what they had always been like. And I had brought her here, expecting something different, something better. As the night wore on, the awkwardness between the family members was palpable. There was no more conversation, no more effort to mask the discomfort that lingered like smoke in the room. My mother didn't bring up the incident with George, and Rachel didn't either. They didn't need to. They knew, just as I did, that things would not change. Not here. Not with them. The next morning, after a quiet breakfast, I knew it was time to leave. I didn't even look for a reason to stay. The visit had been a mistake from the start, and as much as I had hoped for something to shift, it was clear that nothing would. The damage had been done. George had left, and I had no desire to spend another moment in this house, surrounded by people who couldn't and wouldn't see Lily for the beautiful, resilient soul that she was. Packing up was quiet. Too quiet. Lily didn't ask why we were leaving early, but I saw the relief in her eyes. She had been polite and had endured, but it was clear that she was just as ready to go as I was. My mother handed me a foil-covered plate of leftover food with that same forced politeness she had offered when we arrived, and I took it without a word. Rachel barely even looked up to say goodbye, her attention still absorbed by her phone. George didn't reappear. No goodbye. No acknowledgement. No explanation. We left without a proper farewell. Without closure. The entire family acted as if we had never been there in the first place, as if the previous day had been nothing more than a passing inconvenience. And as I drove away, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought us here. I had allowed this visit. I had brought Lily to meet them, despite knowing how cold they were, despite knowing how they would react.
Why?
Was it for her? Or was it for me? I had told myself it was for her, to give her a chance to meet the family she had only heard about, to experience something different, something more. But deep down, I knew. I had hoped, foolishly, that this time would be different. That maybe my mother and Rachel would see Lily the way I did, that they would recognize how much love she had to give, how much kindness she was capable of. I had hoped that the coldness would melt, that George's hardness would crack, that something would change. But nothing changed. And maybe, just maybe, that was the lesson I needed to learn. This visit wasn't just about Lily meeting them. It was about me. About confronting the reality that this family would never give what I had hoped they would. That the past, the pain, the history between us couldn't be erased with a visit or a drawing or a moment of kindness. I had to stop trying to make them into something they weren't, stop waiting for something that would never come. As I glanced at Lily in the rearview mirror, her face pressed against the window, I realized that the greatest gift I could give her wasn't the hope of change. It was the strength to move on, to build something new, something that didn't rely on the acceptance of people who would never see her the way I did. Maybe in the end, that was all we needed. Just each other. And the love we could give, no matter how little we got in return. It was a week after the visit when the package arrived. At first, I thought it was just another letter, another mundane item in the mail, but then I saw it, unmarked, with no return address, just Lily's name written in neat, block letters. My heart skipped. Who could it be from? I hesitated for a moment before handing it to her. She eagerly tore at the wrapping, her eyes wide with curiosity. As she pulled the contents free, my breath caught. Inside was a small, old-fashioned music box, delicate and worn, with hand-carved roses decorating the lid. When Lily wound it, the soft, familiar tune of Somewhere Over the Rainbow filled the room, its hauntingly sweet notes stirring something deep inside me. I stared at it, struck by the unexpected tenderness of it all. This wasn't a typical gift. This was something personal, something real. And then I saw the note. A simple line, written in uneven handwriting, to the bravest girl I know. Thank you for reminding me who I used to be. The handwriting was unmistakable, George's. I couldn't process it at first. After everything that had happened, after the coldness and the silence, here was this small act of unexpected kindness. It was as if, in some quiet, unspoken way, he had acknowledged Lily's impact on him. Maybe not in the way I had hoped, but in a way that meant more than anything. Lily's reaction was pure joy. She held the music box close to her chest, cradling it as if it was the most precious thing she'd ever received. Her smile was wide, untainted by the uncertainty that had clouded her face before. She didn't know how significant this was. She only saw the beauty in the gift itself. To her, it was just a sweet trinket, a new treasure to add to her collection. But to me, it was something much more. It was George's quiet acknowledgement of the gift she had given him, and it was a sign of change, however small. As I watched her, I realized how much Lily had truly changed things, not just for herself, but for George as well. The walls he had built around himself, his bitterness, his refusal to let anyone in, they had started to crack, even if only a little. And that small, simple gesture, this music box, was a reminder that sometimes even the smallest acts of kindness can break through the hardest hearts. They can open doors that seemed locked forever. In the end, maybe it was enough. It's funny how life teaches you the most profound lessons in the simplest moments. Lily's small act of kindness, that fragile drawing, and the quiet gift of the music box, it wasn't just about changing George. It was about showing us all something that we often forget. Kindness, even when faced with cruelty, has power. It has the power to soften the hardest hearts, to reach across the silence, and to spark a change that no one expects. Lily's gift wasn't just for George. It was for all of us. It was a reminder that love and hope don't require validation. They stand on their own. Despite the coldness, despite the rejection, Lily chose to give without expectation. And in doing so, she reminded me that kindness isn't about getting something back. It's about offering something pure. Even when the world doesn't treat you the way you deserve, you still have the choice to be kind. That's where true strength lies. And maybe that's the hardest lesson of all, to never give up, even when it feels like you're fighting against a wall. To keep reaching out, keep showing love, even when it seems like no one is paying attention. Sometimes, the smallest gestures can make the biggest difference, even if they take time to be noticed. Family is complicated, messy, and often painful, but it's still worth the effort. And sometimes, it's the quiet moments, the simple acts of kindness, that break through the noise and change everything.